Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. Welcome to another Division video. We're going to be discussing one huge comparison, basically the elephant in the room that many players who play a lot of these looter shooters or in a sense so-called MMO game have asked. And these are players who in a sense cross over between the Division 2 and Destiny 2. Now, the question is very simple. Why is it that Destiny and Bungie are usually more successful in their deployment of patches, content update, and even expansions than the Division? And the answer to that is a complexity of all kinds of different things. So we'll try to dive into it and look into what's going on. Welcome to the Gaming Daddy channel. If you're new here, you can make sure that you join the community by hitting the subscribe button. It will be greatly appreciated. But more than anything, leave a comment so I can know what you're thinking. And if you have anything to add, it will basically sometimes make its way into a video. This is how we roll out here. So a big question is Destiny is usually on point when it's dropping a lot of its DLC. Not everything is 100% mint, but at least for the most part, most of the community seems satisfied. In fact, a friend of mine and many people have said, you need to come play Destiny and stop this, division loyalty or whatever. And, hopefully I'll be able to do so. I just need time. Time is, something that's very, very critical out here, especially with my family setup and situation. And this is one of the reasons I'm not able to play video games as frequently as I probably should in many cases, because I do cover video games. So I try to keep my library small, and that way I can kind of just dive deeper into games that, in my opinion anyways, would provide a little bit ease and be more less or more, I would say, lenient. I mean, that's the word I want to use to my need for having a lot of time. You get what I mean? Now, Destiny and Bungie are being run in a different light than the Division. You see, the company Bungie has left its former publisher, Activision, and is now in a position where it's making decisions for itself. So already you have cut a huge amount, not just a little amount, a huge amount of the bureaucracy, a huge amount of all of the different stressors that they would have had in order for them to be able to make decisions. And so this is basically now their business. They're running it themselves, and they're sailing that ship knowing that any mistake that they make is going to cost them and can cost them severely. On the other hand, Massive is a Ubisoft studio. So every single person almost that's working there is under the directive or guidance of top brass in some form or the other. So many of them are company men, and even those who may be more than company men but have the entrepreneurial spirit, basically they have the frame of mind, they have what it takes to take Massive to the next level, they may or may not be given a lot of the leeway that could, basically make the studio a much more stronger studio in not only Ubisoft's, eye, but among the other studios around the world. So let me give an example of an entrepreneur that pretty much changed the game for the company that they worked as, maybe say the CEO, and that's Disney. For most of you, I don't know how your thoughts or what it is you think about Disney, but when Bob Iger was there, they were buying stuff left and right. Disney was just taking on all kinds of stuff, and it seemed a little weird at that time, but now it's crazy that most entertainment IPs are owned by Disney. Love it or hate it, they had an entrepreneur in there, somebody who had enough vision to be able to continue to push that company forward. And it seemed like being the CEO, he was given a lot of leeway to do that. In the case of Ubisoft, a lot of the decision making are delegated, by people that are under the CEOs and the COOs and all that. But it doesn't seem like they replicate that leadership structure very much into the studios themselves. Now, yes, I'm not saying that they don't give the studio the heads a lot of leeway. From interviews that I've watched, you could tell that a lot of the studio heads are happy about the amount of freedom in terms of production that they're given. But then I don't know how extensive that is, and I don't think it's extensive enough. That's why we keep seeing a lot of these different things that are being, weird, like some weird decisions that they'll make. They don't necessarily seem coherent. They don't necessarily seem futuristic. They sometimes sometimes seem like they're short-term, decisions that are just there to grab the money. And I don't think a lot of the studio heads and a lot of people that are actually making decisions within the studios are necessarily wanting to make those decisions, which is what brings me to the heart of development. You see, in my opinion, this is what I think. I think the developers at Massive, I think they really do want to reach out to this community many times. I think they actually have a heart for the community. They work on these games for years. When people say the developers are lazy, I'm like, you don't know that. There's no way you know that. You've never stood in the middle of anything going on in Massive for you to look around the offices and say, yep, this guy's just sitting around playing ping pong. Yep, this guy's over here eating chips, so they're lazy. You don't know that. And so when I see that, I'm like, well, that's a subjective statement, if you ask what I mean. But if you were to kind of wait out and see the amount of work and, just the quality that has been put into this game, I don't think laziness is the first thing that can come to your mouth. Maybe you could say overly ambitious and potentially overwhelmed with the amount of work that they've taken on. That could be the reality, because this is not a game that you can find another game that will compare to it, if you get what I mean. So them being in a company where the company basically has a way of its decision making, which I'm just hypothesizing here, I don't know, I've never been in the pipeline, could be what's probably hindering Massive from reaching that kind of potential that, say, Bungie is at right now. You see, in the case of Bungie, if they make a decision, they have to go with it. They can go with those decisions easily. They cut off a lot of those different issues that they probably had to deal with when it came to Activision, and they can go with those decisions. They can make very, very strong commitment, and they can even invite their community on a whim into their studios to just visit with them and get direct feedback. This is something that Massive Ubisoft has to pretty much probably go through all of these different issues, go through all of these different levels of approval before they can pull off. And they've done it many a time, more than even many other studios, but it's not as fluid as, say, the way that, Bungie usually does things. And then also location is a big deal. One of the Division's huge and, bigger player base is the United States, and the studio is located in Sweden. So that's another challenge in terms of a hurdle, because even if they want to bring more and more people from across the world into their studios, they have to fly most of them. Even one of our content creators that's a streamer that lives in the same country as Massive once on a stream said, it's actually quite, a huge distance for me to make my way to the studio if they actually invited me. And so these constraints are somewhat challenging. That's why in the past they've had to use proxy studios like, Ubisoft Reflections in the UK and even Red Storm in the United States to do a few things. So there's so many layers of complexity that goes into it that if you were to remove a lot of the corporate red tape, you will really see not only Massive, but a lot of the studios shine. So I guess this is probably why Ubisoft is probably moving a lot of their direction into the hands of one person. And I'm hoping that that person, and this is some article I read in the news, it's kind of vague in my mind, and I'm hoping that that person allows for the studio heads to make some much more hard-hitting decisions and allow for them to be a lot more free in the way they approach their communities and just trust them. That's another thing. It's hard to trust, a lot of this kind of IP and heavy lifting into the hands of people who, the leader may not necessarily think, are able, or maybe they don't want their heads to roll, so they probably take the safe path. But sometimes you got to take the risk, and Bungie is in the business of taking risks. Having dealt with the publisher and gotten away from under the publisher, I think they understand right now that their success is a lot more critical. In the sense of Massive, if things don't pan out well, I guess Ubisoft can take the developers and shift them around or whatever, or they can move them to a different project. But these are the safety nets that they have, that they don't necessarily feel like they need to take the risk that Bungie is taking. So in the eye, or in practice, this is why Bungie many times comes out on top than Massive Ubisoft itself. One of them is fighting with their hands and feet and biting and just winning, which is Bungie. The other seems to be fighting with a hand or two tied behind their back sometimes. I hope this made a little bit of sense and provided a little bit of just this, exposure as to how I see these two studios and their functionality, because a lot of us have been talking about this in the community, but I would love to hear what it is that you think. Let me know if you think that this really does adversely affect the Division game and Massive compared to Bungie and Destiny. Talk to you guys in another video. Appreciate you guys so much. Peace out.